Morning all. Barnet played away last night against Chingford Chess Club. Now Barnet in the North Circular League, we've been battered and bruised a couple of times now, losing 2 matches, when last year we were the champions. Okay, we didn't have John Piggott, but we had Alex playing for us this match. Unfortunately he wasn't able to play in the other one. But yeah, collectively, you know, it's a 6-board match, so we shouldn't necessarily lose a game in the North Circular just because of one key player missing. But Chingford average rating's going to be lower than the likes of Wood Green or Wanstead or well, there are some other strong clubs in the North Circular League in the top division. But I think Barnet Elizabethan's main goal this time is to try, if possible, to win the Hearts Chess League, which has a lot more divisions, and we haven't won it for ages, many years. You know, so it would be amazing if we could try and win the Hearts League, but it's very, very tough. So anyway, on to this game. So my good friend, who's also got a YouTube channel, Fat and Mad, he did some very high quality videos. We've even done a dual commentary video. I'll put a link to that in the description. Please remind me if I don't. There's a wonderful dual commentary video he helped do, and maybe, you know, we're going to do a longer one soon. So he tested my French defense gambit. I played E4. He played the French defense, so I played B3. So I've won some games in this in the past. I've been playing it in Blitz, as you've noticed. Gets out of that, you know, familiar patterns of the French defence player to sort of undermine White's pawn centre. Instead, you know, this pawn sacrifice offering, if there's the routine D5 and D takes E4, so you can sometimes regain that pawn with a bit of pressure on the diagonal, a bit of pressure on F6. Maybe you can castle queenside. Maybe you can play like G4 and Bishop G2 later. There's all sorts of exciting possibilities that this gambit offers. So it sidesteps a lot of the French defence opening theory. I've put a few variations into this game using Ribka, just out of theoretical interest, really. I should have really added some comments after each sequence of moves to really know what's going on, to make sure, you know, the assessment. But okay, we'll try and work through some of those variations that I've inserted, and I'll give you the PGN in the description. So B6. So he's surprising me now. Is this a symmetrical variation of this B3 line? So we both finish here to our queen's bishops. But have I got a problem with that E4? What do I want to do? I don't want to play E5, you know, that would weaken these 2 squares. Lovely knights, you know, maybe that knight can manoeuvre to F5. Don't want to play that. So, do I want to protect the pawn? If I play D3, I seem I've weakened this square even more. I've already weakened it with B3. And might, you know, Bishop B4 might be annoying, provoking further weaknesses. I don't want to play the poxy looking F3. Queen E2, yes, possible, but at first I played Knight C3 because maybe I want to castle queenside. So Knight F6 and now Queen E2. Okay, and now he plays. I was pleased with this move, Bishop B4, because I thought I'd get the bishop pair. I didn't mind capturing with my pawn to get some pressure on the D file. If I'm going to castle queenside anyway, that might be handy. Now, in some of the variations, that is echoed actually D7 pressure in some lines. So E5, and he takes on C3. Okay, doubling my pawns. We've got a dynamic situation. So I've got the bishop pair still, but he's inflicted some structural damage. His knight's a bit of a nuisance coming to D5. Now here, actually, there's a tempo losing move, which is probably the best move. Against knight F4, which might be annoying, coordination against G2, I played an awkward looking move, which I think both of us agreed was a good move. In fact, the spectator in the post-mortem also thought it was a good move. But actually, forgetting the history of the game, Ribka's quite brutal. It's saying, really, you know, this position, the best move in this position, forget the history of the game. Ribka's really indicating Queen D2. Just waste the tempo of Queen D2. This is not really a tempo critical situation. It's kind of closed. There aren't too many open lines. The only person that's got an open line in this position is me, the D file. And I'm going to castle queenside and accentuate that pressure on the D file. Maybe C4 and D7 will come under fire later. So Queen D2 satisfies the nature of the position, really, that it's closed. And if we look at this variation, it's the Rybka line, white could end up with a small advantage in this line. Okay, black might not want to undouble the pawns, but if he's going to have an attack against my king, he wants to open the A file, so it's swings and roundabouts. The fascinating thing here is Rybka's actually offering a piece sack line. This is straight down a Rybka shallow analysis line. There's a piece sack after A3, which was basically refusing to move this knight. Otherwise, you have to protect D7, etc. So, in fact, there's this piece sack here given with an advantage to white, a small advantage to white. Because it is kind of dangerous for my king here. These light squares, A3. So interesting, really, interesting line. So on move 8, there's also another alternative. Knight coming to F3. Not being too terrified about the knight F4 threat. If knight F4, then again, Queen D2 is good. So say knight A6, and now here, castle in queenside. I think this is a slight advantage for white as well, given by Rybka. Okay, so in the game anyway, I played this kind of awkward looking knight H3, which I thought was clever at the time. But it's not really that clever, it's kind of committal actually. The knight on the rim, playing around with rule breaking moves. You might try and justify it, you might think this is the exceptional position. But really, there's such simple alternative non-rule breaking moves. Or rules which really have no relevance to the position. Queen D2, okay, it loses a tempo. But of the rules to break, maybe this is a lesser evil to play Queen D2 than Knight H3. Okay, so he comes in with Queen H4. You see, that's another possibility which is not usually on the cards. Queen infiltration to H4. If the knight had been sensibly placed, say with Queen D2 anyway, then Knight F3 would either repel the queen, if I'd played Queen D2, this is not really on the cards now, is it? Because there's the natural Knight F3. The knight is good on F3. There's a lot of squares it covers, including H4. So it just shows that of the lesser evil of rules to break, this wasn't the best one. So Queen H4, black's on the verge of equality. He's able to exchange off now pair of knights and get the queen quite a nice outpost square now, this F5 square. But seemingly, I thought I was comfortable here, and actually Rybka is now giving a slight advantage after G3, because at least I'm getting a tempo gain to challenge that bishop, to weaken Costas's king a little bit, and he offers the exchange of bishops. So now, actually, this is where it gets slightly interesting. I'm a bit concerned. Is he going to kind of do this restraining move, C5? But it really is never on the cards, because black would never want this backward D pawn. So that's not a real positional threat at all, this idea of blockading these pawns. It's not really on the cards in this position. But also, I was in that area of attention. I was looking at C5 myself, because if takes, then Queen B5 looked a bit dangerous. But actually, there's a more clinical move Rybka generated, Rook D4. Now, the idea of this is actually to repel that queen from the F5 outpost square, and then to use the diagonal to put more pressure on F7, because that would be a nasty check, exploiting the fact that the king's out and about a bit at the moment, at this very moment. So it's a momental kind of exploitation. Now let's say, for example, C5. Here's an example: Rook F4, Rook G4, check, and I could take on F7. Now that looks a bit odd, doesn't it? This line. Why did that happen? Why Rook G4? Well, Rook G4 gets the queen off C2. I think that's simply that. It's simply that, gets the queen off there. Now, if Queen F5, actually, this is a question now. Probably, maybe G7 might be possible to play. So these awkward-looking rook moves are actually quite effective, aren't they, against these momentary tactical vulnerabilities? To play Rook D4, interesting, isn't it? Now, maybe he would have played what he played in the game, which is that G5 move. Sorry, which I've sneaked in just there. But let's have a look at another line. Knight C6. Again, Queen F3 is again powerful. So getting this queen on this diagonal might be good for exerting pressure. Then I could exert pressure on d7. So here's a line. Actually, I say that, but rook e1. Okay, so rook e1 means the bishop is now free to come on this diagonal if it can support. If e5 is supported like that, bishop now responsibility can go on that diagonal. And the point is about f7 pressure, actually getting rid of the defender of f7. So it all starts to make sense. This rook d4 to f4. Not so academic now, is it? If bishop a3 is also on the cards. So if a concession is forced from black to play d6, then black's pawns look a bit loose here, and this is a Rybka line with pressure on d6 now. So lovely battery here with the queen on d1. Now this is the sort of stuff, of course I didn't see any of these variations, these are computer generated variations, but it just shows, you know, the pressure points in black's position a little bit, and maybe, you know, the opportunities that this bishop has in theory in this game. So anyway, after king takes b7, I played c5, not really looking at rook d4 that much at all. So c5, and he played g5. Now interestingly here, okay, g5, there's actually a problem here for black after the move h4, because really he's tied down. If I played h4 instead of f4, f4 is the move I played, he's a bit tied down, you know, with his rooks, especially this d7. Example, h6, I could play rook d4, so that's hitting the knight and also threatening rook f4 if there's ever g takes. So knight d5, say, rook a4, the rook's also able to shift quite menacingly. Now say g4, h5. This kind of position is interesting because, okay, the knight looks temporarily quite strong, you know, beautiful, but really it's not doing too much. However, I wouldn't like this. I know this is technically giving us advantage for Rybka, but the bishop, actually, on second thoughts, I think black is nice here. He's got, you know, that a file. My d file is stuffed up with that huge knight on d5. Black could be potentially great compensation for the pawn, but there was another line in this with h4. Let's have a quick look at that. So, or has it gone? There was an exchange on. Okay, let me think. If it was g4, I think we need to add a kibitzer here, just to explore the variations here. Uh-oh, what's going on here? Adding a kibitzer is taking time. Whoops. Okay. So this move h4 here. So if g4, so h4. Right, first of all, the most obvious move might fail. So if hg, take the rook over here. Now say rook takes d7, is that too dangerous? It might be because of rook h1, equal. Actually, bishop c1, knight c6, it's given us equal. So that's not so clear either. But there might be a line in here which actually is better than that. In fact, not to take on d7, but to play g4 first. Queen g6. Somehow this is slightly different now after rook takes d7. This check is not so so bad. I think that is because there's no queen f4s to exploit the bishop on c1 actually. Yeah, in the other line that's a constant threat. So here white might actually have an advantage. This is all quite tricky stuff really, isn't it? Even to take on d7. So if I take on d7 immediately, there's no queen f1 here. What am I going on about? So what is the point here? After the check, it's too difficult to fathom really. Okay, why this position is I can't work it out, actually. I can't work it out. So anyway, let's go back to the game. Off the g5, I played f4, which is probably a bit of a poxy move. G4 now play Queen C4, trying to get some sort of attack, but also eyeing this idea of an exchange sack. So Knight D5, I was tempted to play Rook D5. I don't want him playing C6. And it's a sort of nebulous compensation actually, but I thought it looked initially kind of promising that this bishop could be kind of dangerous on D6. There's a certain bailout opportunity though afforded by this position if I did want to bail out, which of course I didn't really see. But here there's Queen B5. It's got a sneaky idea, which I'll show you, of actually playing Rook takes D6. So if Rook takes D6, then there's Queen E8, and if CD, then there's a perpetual check. So that's the sneaky idea. If I wanted to try and force a draw, this move, which seems to be doing nothing, is actually putting pressure on B6, which can be dismantled if that pawn can be distracted. So that lovely idea of Rook D6, it's a tactical idea. So Queen B5, I didn't play that. I played Rook D4. After Queen E6, Queen E4, and actually Costas is maintaining positional grip on the position. Is actually better here, theoretically. So F5, F6 is also good. So I'll be worse here in this kind of position, exchange down for not much. So after A4 he plays D5, which might not be theoretically the best move. And I thought, okay, if I've got either A5 with the idea of moving the rook. Let's have a quick look at A5. This really leads to black having a clear advantage, I think, though. This nice pawn on D4. This pawn's not doing anything. There's no lines of attack. It looks as though actually black's positionally crushing white here. So anyway, after A4 he played D5, and I thought the best lesser evil might be just to take. But actually it turns out black is doing very well here. Not in this continuation, not as much. It's only a slight advantage to black. Now if he had played Queen takes D6, we'd ruled this out in post-mortem, thinking it's harmless for black. It's not. Taking on here, okay, it's protecting C2, but if he comes with this check, the point is we didn't follow it up. There's Rook E2 here, and this starts to get quite kind of nasty for whites quite quickly. So Queen G4, Queen C2 is starting to look very nasty. So say Queen G7, Rook takes H2. It's hardly any compensation for being the exchange down. Now thankfully in the game, okay, after Rook D6 he plays C takes D6, which only leaves black with a small advantage in theory. I can set up a kind of cozy position here after King B2 where I'm threatening maybe A5. It's got to be careful. We looked at some lines with someone else as well in the post-mortem area of Chingford Chess Club, and actually there were some tricky lines with the black king getting kicked about. Now of course Rybka would avoid all those tricks and lines and just you know play brilliantly, you know, 3,200, but we were finding resources for both sides anyway in this position. So actually a draw in this position might actually, on this fast time limit, be kind of a reasonable result, because it's not so easy for black to make progress. Now you might disagree with that, okay? You might want to put some variations in the comments of this video, that's fine, but no, honestly, we did find some variations where it was tricky for both sides, okay? And so anyway, so that was last night, and okay, comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.